crushers there recently. Everything's backwards on this thing. I have to make sure I'm turning it the right way. We're going to talk a lot about this book today because it really has a ton to do with the work that we do here at EIS. Jesse's a family man with his wife and 2 kids. I think I got that right. He'll correct me, of course, if I'm wrong. He's got a very diverse background as a teacher, a businessman, a carpenter, a minister, done some work, in fact, with John Maxwell, and he really has a real entrepreneurial heart. So we're excited to talk with Jesse today. So let's welcome Jesse Barnett. Hey!
And just like that, here I am.
And there he is live.
I need everybody to introduce me like that. That was really fun.
I hope I got the facts right. That's all.
You did. You got the facts right. I am family man. Just celebrated 20 years. Married to my college sweetheart Becca, and have 2 teenagers in the house, a daughter and a son. So absolutely, love of my life.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Congrats.
Thank you very much. And yeah, all the rest of it is kind of a crazy path to get to where I am today, which I guess is all part of the story, which is a good thing to kind of lean into.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what we had kind of chatted about is, we don't want to have a clinical environment here on this program. We really want to have it be conversational and let people in on, who you are, where you came from, kind of hear your heart. So maybe you can kind of share this a little bit of that background info.
Yeah, absolutely. So believe me, I am not the clinical person. I am just a guy trying to do my best to figure out life and try to help other people do the same thing. And so I kind of have a teaching heart. I like to teach people and like to help people, but it took me a little bit of time to get to that point. I actually was you mentioned carpentry work. So I grew up doing carpentry work. My dad was a carpenter. And so from the time that I joke from the time I was 14 years old, I had a hammer in my hand and was working with my hands all through high school and college doing that kind of work. And it really taught me a lot of lessons about hard work, but also just how to put disconnected things together and really to take pieces and parts that left to themselves didn't look like much, but turn them into something that was pretty amazing. And so I loved doing that kind of work, but I wanted to do something different with my life. And so when I went to college, ended up getting a business degree. It's funny, Bill, I kind of kicked around the idea of doing some counseling at one point, and I'm not sure I'm a good enough listener to do that. I get in there and want to fix things, but I did some business stuff. So kind of have that business background. I actually ended up going back to school to pursue a degree in seminary. And out of that, you mentioned your 20s. That's kind of what I was doing in my 20s was raising my family and going back to school because I knew I wanted to write, but I also wanted to have a strong background so that I felt like I had something that people would listen to. I was very aware that I needed to kind of earn my podium, I guess you could say, to where people had something that was worth listening to. And coming out of that season, that's when I started teaching and actually spent several years doing adult education. So I was helping with GED students, helping people that were coming back to school, people who had English was a second language, and working with those students to work on getting their GED. And that transitioned into a time where I worked with youth, with at-risk youth, doing the same thing, doing adult education, but also helping them with job skills and moving into college, just trying to decide what they wanted to do. And I feel like I'm rambling on, but it's all part, I'm going somewhere, I promise. But then out of that time, I had been pursuing writing. And so I had started a blog and was working on kind of developing my voice as a writer. And from that, you mentioned John Maxwell. I was able to get on with John Maxwell's organizations and be part of their content team for a couple of years and worked on a variety of different projects in that arena. And then for about the last 4 or 5 years, I've done freelance work on my own and work to help people write books, help create courses, help do coaching materials. You kind of don't realize that everything that's written out there, somebody wrote, which sounds kind of counterintuitive, but every message that's out there, somebody's behind it working on that message so that it resonates with the person that reads it.
For sure.
It seems like you've done just about everything. So if I need any life advice, you're the person to come to. I'm sure you're bound to have an answer.
It does seem like that. It's funny because I don't know how this fits with my personal temperament, but even when I was younger and working, my first job out of college was sales, and I worked for a building products company, and so we sold a variety of different products, and my goal was always to know something about about everything, because I wanted to be able, if somebody called in, I wanted to be able to help them, and I wanted to not have to say, oh, well, you need to go talk to this person because they're the expert in that area. And so I've always thrived on learning a bunch of different things and knowing a lot about a lot, but I also realize that there's a benefit in narrowing down and focusing, because then you can get too broad and you're not really that great at any one thing because you're trying to do a little bit of everything. So it's kind of a battle sometimes with me to keep learning and growing, but also then to know, all right, that's a thing best served for somebody else to do. You lean into where you're gifted and where your strengths are.
Yeah, it sounds like that's, what's kind of been happening in your journey, which I think is a part of everybody's journey, I guess, hopefully, is that as we go through these different phases and connect with different areas that we have interest in and so on, that we do get kind of honed in on our sweet spots and our wheelhouses and the giftings and callings and stuff that we have. And that's what I saw with you too, is that, you moved into this area of writing, and we talked a little bit about last night about these workshops that you're working on and all of that. So it looks like your passion is like all gone funneled into that direction now, and definitely your wheelhouse. And the other thing too is that you were just talking about like doing things for other people. I learned that lesson a long time ago, that everything that I do is really always for someone else. Everything that I learn, anything that I wind up involved in, because I over my journey when we got married and stuff, we had several houses and had some pastors and stuff, and I would move into their houses because they would go on a missions trip or move away for a period of time or whatnot. And I would wind up doing the house. And I learned lessons like that when I'm doing all this work. You think, well, gee, I wish I could live here for 10 or 15 years and enjoy this, but it was always for someone else. And it sounds like all the things that you've done too, it's just really about, helping other people.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, I think the older I get, I look for those opportunities more. I think I've always tried to serve other people well, and that's part of who I am. But the older I get, the more I look for those opportunities and try to slow down and see, to see where you can help other people. And you never really know where those opportunities are going to come from. We had an interesting weekend this weekend where between doing some volunteer work and just running into people, running errands and doing things, had 5 or 6 really meaningful short conversations. And, one of them, I ended up not planning on it, but I gave my book to a guy, probably 19, that we just hit it off and had a spark and talked. And when I walked away, he was looking it over and reading it. And I think when you look for those opportunities to serve people, sometimes serving people is just listening and just being available to them and saying, okay, you're doing life, I'm doing life, deep a layer down, we're probably struggling with some of the same things, and just being able to go into that season and look for those opportunities to help people, to serve people, and do it in a way knowing that you might not ever see the return, I'm super comfortable with that. Like I may never see the return. I probably never see that kid that I gave the book to again, unless he reaches out to me and emails me or something like that. That's okay. Like, to me, that's energizing to think something I have done can affect people that I'll never meet. To me, that keeps me going. That's a cool thing.
Mm-hmm. So, kind of moving forward, developing your heart, your passion like I said, that's what I really believe that's what we're here to do, is to help people to not just get better or fix areas of their lives, like I said, but really develop heart, develop passion for life, discover your purpose, your why, and all of that. Let's talk about how Soul Crushers kind of got into your heart, got seeded in there, and, how it wound up, what kind of vision that took to put that together. And what was that drove you to, kind of meet that need out there for the people that were going to receive that book at some point?
Sure. Well, so I have a part of, I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine today and talking about journaling. He's written a book and I'm reading through it, and he talks about journaling your ideas. Because as a writer, you can chase some rabbit trails sometimes and go, oh, I'm going to talk about that and I'm going to work on that. And you just go in 100 different directions. So I have a notebook with book ideas, like, oh, I'm going to write a book about this, and I'm going to write a book about this. And just for anybody who's watching, just to be clear, I primarily write nonfiction. So I do teaching books, leadership books, personal growth in that kind of space. And so I had written down, sometimes all it is a phrase or a turn of phrase just lodges in my mind. And I'm like, I'm going to do something with that someday. So I thought of that idea of Soul Crushers, and just thought, as I tried to see people, as I tried to be aware of people, I'm a person of faith. So I tend to try to look at people the way Jesus would look at people and go, okay, how would he interact with this person and see this person? And as I've seen people in that regard, I realize that all of us are just carrying a load a lot of times that nobody sees and nobody understands. And we hit surface level. How you doing, Bill? Oh, I'm doing good. How's the weather out in California? Oh, it's not bad. Yeah, I live in Atlanta. How about those Hawks? They're doing great. And we, all right, well, have a good day. And we go and we leave people, and that's as deep as it gets. And so as I thought about Soul Crushers, I just started jotting down these burdens that people carry. And the image, when you're writing books like that, a lot of times there's a metaphor that kind of carries through, so the message connects to that metaphor. And the metaphor that I had, the thought I had, was of every day we wake up and we grab our bag of burdens, whatever it may be. For me, it may be pride and worry and anxiety. For someone else, it may be loneliness or hopelessness or unforgiveness. And we grab those burdens, we shoulder them, and we slog our way through the day. And we wonder, why are our backs bowed down, and why are we worn out? Why are we not able to love and serve others? And it's because we're full of burdens. We're full of the wrong things. So it leaves us with no space to focus on the right things or the good things. And so as I started jotting down that list, I started thinking of playing on words about what's the opposite of this soul crusher. Is there any, like pride, for instance, is there anything good that comes of pride? And, I'm proud of my work. There's good pride, there's pride where you've done something well and you should be proud of it. But a lot of times it's not good. It keeps me from addressing any needs or growing in ways I need to grow or things like that. So I looked at kind of the good and the bad, the upside and the downside of these things, and really just started sketching out, what's that look like to a person who's struggling with that? What do they feel like? What are they needing to address? And then painting a picture of hope. What does it look like if you deal with this? If you get rid of that anxiety, or you get rid of that fear, what might you do with your life? What might you move? How might you move in that direction? And so I actually, a lot of times when I write, I try to be highly relational. I don't take myself too seriously. And I admit, like, this is something I'm dealing with too. I'm just a regular person going through these things. And then I try to give people tools to, okay, you've seen the pain, you've seen the problem. Let's address what that is. Let's call it what it is. And here's some tools that can help you work through them. And that was really my goal for the whole book. And just try to work through it and go, okay, that's an important thing. Let's go through it and let's solve this together. And, I will say this, and then I'll quit talking for a minute, but the tendency is to want to fix it all at once. And, Bill, this, your book's called The Process. So a process takes time. And I did a little doodle for my daughter. She's in college, and I did a little doodle on the board, which helped me. Was just sometimes I had a starting line and a finish line, and I had a bunch of arrows in between. And sometimes the arrow goes, you get halfway, and then another halfway, and you're at the finish line. And sometimes it's just a start, and you're just sliding through it. And I told her, I said, as long as you're moving forward towards that finish line, sometimes you're moving, feels like miles at a time, and sometimes you're moving inches at a time. But it's the process. You're sliding forward, you're keeping forward, you're turning your back away from that starting line, and you're moving towards that finish line. And I have to remind myself that too, because it's easy to want to see, where you want to go, especially if you're in this space with personal growth and development. You have a pretty good idea of where you want to get to, but sometimes you underestimate maybe the distance that it's going to take, or the amount of time it's going to take you to get there. Okay, now I'm going to take a pause, and you can.
Well, I'm going to for the sake of everybody who's watching, I'm just going to name some of these, basically the chapters that you have in the book, because this is stuff that everybody deals with. And, we talk about the process, and then Ness, you can kind of come in on the heels of this too. And maybe with some experience and, kind of entering into the process and dealing with these factors. But these are debilitating things that all of us can, most of the time we're going to encounter. Not most of the time, we're going to encounter these. And they're barriers and blockades and walls to getting to where we want to go in life. I don't care where that is, to a healthy place emotionally, to a healthy place spiritually, to be able to function well, even in society. All of these areas are contingent upon us not being tripped up by these areas in life. And so these areas, for everybody's benefit, are fear, doubt, anger, bitterness, worry, unforgiveness, jealousy, selfishness, pride, disappointment, and hopelessness, which is the big all-encompassing one that really, I think, gets birthed over a long period of time of dwelling in the land of all of these other places and the quicksand of those areas, and not being able to get out, even just through taking your thoughts captive, which we talk about here all the time. So Ness, maybe you could share a little bit too, experientially, on that too.
Yeah, definitely. I felt it, Jesse, when you were talking about carrying around that backpack and just being so full of the wrong things, that there's no room for any good. And that's probably like a perfect analogy to explain, I think, my life when coming into the process. I just had so many things. I kind of had a victim mentality of like, there's no one else around me that has these burdens, first of all. So I didn't even account for like other people and their situations, but it was also, I was just so immersed in negativity. And that was the space that I lived in for sure. And I didn't even question what it would look like to get out on that other side. And what if you do the work? Because I didn't even know work like this was really even a thing. I just thought, oh, you have a messed up childhood. You kind of just got to carry that with you for the rest of your life. And beginning to work with Bill and realizing that you can one by one, like you said, it is a process. It's not just going to be where you drop the whole backpack off all at once. It's going to take some time, of course. But with that, obviously, comes more and more room for the good. And just even like being able to develop faith and having that element come in has just really changed the way I've looked at life and experiences. And it just seems like your book and the work that Bill does in his book, they're all kind of commingled in some way in terms of just the lessons that you teach, and they're just really important. And I'm experiencing them firsthand, being in the process of doing the work for sure.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too, Bill, because as you read that list, I'm sure the people listening can think, oh, you didn't say this thing, like, well, what about loneliness, and what about this or what about that? And the truth is, for some people, the people I've talked to that have read the book say, this chapter was written for me. The worry chapter, that was me. Or, and other people like, that's not a problem for me. I don't have that issue, but I'm dealing with anger. And that was the chapter that was for me. And so I think the truth is everybody's backpack doesn't look the same. The things you pick up and struggle with don't look the same. And there may even be seasons where you struggle with a thing, and then you make headway and you overcome it, but then another one sneaks in and it's like, where did that come from? And so I think you just have to, what I wanted people to have was the awareness of, a lot of times we sort of make a choice to pick that thing up. And like you mentioned, you had some stuff that you were dealing with that you carried and just thought, well, I guess this is how it is. And I think for sometimes we know what the issue is, and it's just a little bit scary to think of doing something about it. So I think that's a helpful thing to remember.
Yeah. I definitely think for a long time, my identity was wrapped up in all those things. So it almost was scary to let it all go because I couldn't rely on that as a crutch anymore. And like my behavior could not be, can't just point to that. So that was definitely a hard part, was just deciding to let it go for sure.
Uh-oh. I think we lost Jesse. Well, while he's finding his way back here, just to give people a little preview about the book. Here he is. He's back.
Sorry about that.
Stop touching buttons, Jess.
Yeah, really.
It was just too much fire in here. You had to go for a minute.
Now you know why I have a media czar. See, I got to keep things rolling here, right?
That's right.
So I was just going to share with folks too, along lines what you said. It's not just a book where you're telling people about these things. And again, we chatted about this last night. You have, you do have descriptions about what you're talking about, of course, but you have like fill in the blank areas, like acknowledgements, just making a decision on what you're going to do about this, deflecting and deferring instead of choosing to be afraid. I'll choose to be confident, things of that nature. And then a reflection about what happened today after I did something about it. And then an anticipation about tomorrow, even including that forward journaling aspect kind of that we talked about as well, So, and then there's action steps and quotes at the end of each of these chapters. So this is such a cool layout. So just for those, again, that are watching and that are interested in, picking this book up, I love books that have the how-to and the fill in the blanks and the engaging in the process part of stuff, so that you can really sink your teeth into this thing and actually, because you have to integrate these things into your everyday life. You can't just learn about them. It's not an intellectual lesson that you learn. It's something that you implement in your everyday life. Like Vanessa said, is like, her behavior. And, Vanessa, if you don't mind me sharing a little bit, we've talked about this before.
Go ahead. Put it all out there. It's all good.
For me too, I remember back in the day, like my go-to was just anger, because I was so angry at myself. I was deflective to other people in the wrong way. I would deflect any responsibility to other people. I was sarcastic. I just hated my life as a result of all of this. Hopelessness was certainly a part of it that was driving me. And so my go-to was anger. And so how do I correct that in my everyday life? If somebody just told me about like, hey, stop being angry, man. Like, life's good. Why don't you just get over that? You're like, hey, thanks. But how do I actually engage in a process with my thought life and my feelings and my emotions and my life situations that actually leads me down a pathway of change?
Definitely. I know, like in our sessions, Bill, and the work that we do, you might bring up like an apparent cycle you might see, and it might be really hard to hear it. But I think what the next step is always the most important and is empowering somewhat, is being like, okay, hey, how can I actually break down what's going on? How can I figure this out in day-to-day life and actually learn from it and try to correct it, as opposed to just hearing about it, kind of knowing there's some messed up stuff going on and being like, oh, well, I don't really know what to do. So it's more than just the concept. It's applying the knowledge and being able to kind of figure it out.
Mm-hmm. So Ness, in your experience, since we've been working together, I mean, you find that you've been doing this pretty much on a daily basis. I mean, some days are better than others, of course, and some days are more trying, but you're implementing the process to some degree, right?
Yeah, definitely. Whatever it looks like in day-to-day life obviously is different, but I know a big thing for me is taking my thoughts captive. That's just been a major thing. I know that like my inner voice was not always the healthiest. So having to catch that really helps a lot. Doing like the forward journaling that we just spoke about, and having like one thing to really work on. And so that this way it doesn't look like this huge mountain to climb, but focusing on one thing at a time and really looking to how to apply what it is I want to in a certain day or in a certain situation. That helps as well, for sure.
Well, that's what I meant earlier when I said this book is a great companion for anybody who's in the process, for sure.
As I was working on putting it together, and even on the layout and the design, Bill, we talked about that last night a little bit. I was trying to split the difference between a book that looks like, when you hear book, what you think about, and it goes on a shelf and it's all words, and maybe you read through it one time and then go, oh, that was great. I'm going to work on that and put it into practice. And then it goes on your shelf, and it goes, you grab the next one from the stack, and that's where it goes. I was trying to bridge that gap and make something that had plenty of white space, plenty of places you can underline, jot notes. It's not a workbook, but I tried to kind of be hybrid to where it could be your go-to guide. And what I hope is, in the years to come, it's something that's dog-eared and tattered and underlined, and something goes back to again and again, just as a reminder or a refresher that the likelihood is that you're gonna bump into these things for your whole life, and this is a way to get past that and get through it, and to be encouraging. And you mentioned the quotes about different things or the action steps. I love that idea of practicality. Let's do something about this right now. Somebody said it was a light read but a heavy application. A pastor I was talking to, and I said, oh, I'm going to write that down. That's good, because that was my goal. I don't want to write something that you go, oh, this is so boring, I don't like this, or this is so hard to understand. I want to write things that are practical and help people, and then we put them into action and hopefully change our lives and make them better.
Yeah, and I'm just looking again, flipping through the pages here on page 45. You have the thorny seeds of doubt. And once again, you have very practical things that people can relate to and understand. Like, no one could ever love someone like me. I'll never be able to measure up to my parents' standards. I'll never be as good as the other players on the team. I'll never be a real writer, singer, artist, whatever it is that we'd like to become. This one is a great one, that, he or she said this, but they really meant that. And reading people, and I can so relate to that way of just encountering life. Oh, as a melancholy, particularly, always feeling like the odd man out, like everybody else got it, but I didn't get it. And that was so much of my believing and thinking. In the Bible, it says, for example, as a man believes in his heart, so he is. So however we're thinking and believing in our minds and hearts, that's how we're going to live it out.
Yeah.
And so these kinds of examples are so powerful when we read it. And then my other thought was how they weave a web, all of these concepts, I'll just call them concepts, and realities of how we can perceive life that are all negative. Like you pointed out the difference between good pride and bad pride before, right? Some is healthy, some isn't so healthy. The difference between faith and fear, they're really the same thing. It's just a matter of what we're believing in, things of that nature. And but they all weave a web that catches us every single time. Yeah. And then we get caught, just like a spider web. We get caught in that thing and we're trapped and we can't get out. And how are you going to get out? You're not just there. You can't just get fixed. Mm-hmm. Can't just take a pill. I got a headache. I take some Tylenol, I get rid of a headache, but none of that works. You have to enter into the pain of that, to the dysfunction of that, not pretend it's not there. Like Vanessa said again, like not just excuse my behavior patterns or sweep things under the rug or pretend and put on a false self or any of those mechanisms that we utilize, what we call coping and hoping and survival techniques and things of that nature. Like we got to hit these things head on and deal with them and engage with them so that we can find victory as we keep moving forward. So that's my dissertation as a just kind of reading through this and just, again, love the way that you have this set up.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And it's funny, two comments on that. One is I I was always thinking of that balance between, I don't want this to be a negative book, right? You know what I mean? Like there's things where you go, oh, I don't want to think about this. This is hard. And so I was trying to keep it hopeful. And I've kicked around, I need to write the companion book that's like soul builders. And these are the things that you do that, you know, maybe they're the opposite of the things I wrote about, but maybe they're just, let's think about these good things. Let's think on what is the positive aspects, which is the second point. Like what you said made me think about, when you talk about the thoughts that go on in your mind, I try to keep this sort of front and center as I was writing. Bill, if you said, you know, you texted me and said, you're so stupid, you know, you're never going to be a good writer. And Vanessa, if you were like, you know, I saw that post you did online and that was just, what were you thinking? That was horrible. And you guys just were berating me and making me feel terrible. It's very easy for me to go, all right, I'm losing his number and I'm not letting her follow me on social media or whatever. I can choose to silence your voice and your input. What goes on in my head, that's with me all the time. And it's a much harder thing. Or maybe harder is not the right word, but you have to be much more aware of that. That voice in your head can lead you in, you know, several different ways. And so I tried to keep that in mind for the reader, saying, what is that voice telling me? And evaluating that. Is that thing I'm hearing, is that true? Is that really true? Like you mentioned that list, Bill, is what so-and-so said, I'm reading in, this is what they must have meant by that. And that, you know, that's kind of unfair sometimes to do that, to assume the worst. It's like, hopefully I can assume the best about people. And I'm kind of an eternal optimist, so I do that anyway, but trying to make sure those thoughts that are going on, just having something to evaluate them against and saying, okay, is this helping me? Is this, you know, knowing now what I know, that I struggle with worry, is this thought that's in my head, is it truth? Is there something I need to think about differently, knowing that this is going to be a struggle with worry or doubt or fear or anxiety, whatever it is? So try to keep that in mind as I was writing.
Yeah, and that's where we tap into, just to take it a step deeper even, is we tap into the childhood scripts that we had talked about earlier and that archaeological journaling aspect. And Ness, maybe you can kind of speak into this because we just did a little bit of this work last week, actually. You know, these scripts that get written on our hearts through our negative childhood experiences, and there's some positive ones too, but that they don't bother us. It's the negative ones that mess with us as we grow up into adulthood, you know. And those are scripted things, Jesse, like you said. Those would be what we call the lies that we're buying into about ourselves, about other people, and they're in place, you know. And so we have to, that's why the archaeological aspect of that journaling is to uncover those areas, so that, or however you want to look at it, pulling the roots out of those things, so that the seeds of truth can be planted in those places in our hearts that displace the lies that we believed in so long, that started to dictate our behavior patterns, cause us to be dysfunctional, moving on in relationships and life, and so on. So Ness, maybe you can come again on the heels of that and put some personal experience.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, journaling has been crucial in my journey for sure. And I think just with the recent journaling that I did, I was looking at a lot of things in my relationship with my parents, my father specifically, and I think a lot of it affected like my worth, my own personal identity and worth, and those things that kind of maybe happened or didn't happen, or I had a lack of in childhood, kind of have played out in a way where I am unsure of myself, or maybe look to people please because that's where I get the validation from. And these were things that I've been doing my whole life that I never really would have, I think, been able to pinpoint if I hadn't gone back and looked at these experiences that I've had. And for Bill to be able to be like, okay, well, this explains this, and this doesn't have to stay this way. These things aren't true. Like, now let's work on fixing them in a way where you can pour some positive as opposed to listening to those negative, those lies, the false self, and all of those things.
Yeah. So again, this this book is such a great companion for that part of the journey, just kind of realizing that's just what I was mentioning last night about when we had our conversation about that forward journaling part.
Mhm.
That's the part about engaging on a regular basis, moving forward every day. Like, again, not just reading a book and banking that I might remember something from it, as a text, as something that I'm putting into practice on an everyday basis and taking it out the door with me,
Yeah.
as I go about my daily journey and watch how I react and respond, for example. And the difference between the two is vast, of course, in work situations and personal situations and relationships, basically keeping a little bit of a journal on that. Like, how did I do today? And again, I saw that in your setup here. Like, today I'll be mindful of, or something, however you had written about that, or, I'll affirm this today. I struggle with fear. Each day I'll pick up my fears of ... so that, I can get real specific about something that I'm paying attention to during the course of the day.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And my thought with that part, and I'll be honest with you, like, that's not my natural inclination to do, like that section you're talking about, those 5 things that I have in each chapter. That's not second nature to me. It's almost like I have to go, oh yeah, that's important, I should write about this or think about that. But one of the things that, even hearing you just talk about that, when you name that today, this is the thing I'm going to struggle with. I'm going to struggle with fear. It almost, it helps rob that thing of its power. It's almost like fear is this huge, a huge big rock that I can't even hope to conquer. And so it's powerful. It has, every day it's going to be this thing that weighs over me or hangs over my head. And when you name that, like I try to get to help the reader do, and go, look, it's real. It's big, but I'm going to own up that I'm going to struggle with this. Sometimes it's knowing what's going to come around that corner. It just robs it of its power. And it's like, okay, I can get out of the way. If you could see a car speeding around a corner, you're going to get out of the way, versus if you just walk out in front of it and it hits you, you didn't know it was coming. That's not good. So I try to make it like that, where to help these things be robbed of their power a little bit by owning up to that it is a struggle, that I am going to face it. So when it does come along, it's not a shock or a surprise.
Just want to make a quick mention of people that are watching. If you want to ask some questions, now is the time to start putting them up there so that Jesse can respond to those.
This is the stump our guest moment of the show, right? Or it's like, all right, let's see what this guy can do.
Let's see how good he really is.
Yeah, let's see how really good he is. That's pretty funny.
So let's talk a little bit about, for those who, and I have some clients that I really think would be excellent writers, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I've told them that. People told me that a long time ago. They said, when are you going to start writing, Bill? And it took years and years for me to do it.
Sure.
And I try to encourage them. And we talked a little bit about some stuff that you have in the works,
mm-hmm.
right, to help maybe fledgling writers or people who have an interest in that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I love to do is help people who have a message to share, help them kind of determine what it is that they should write about. And in the nonfiction space, a lot of times there's people who have a core teaching that they work around. And you mentioned Tony and Frances. For Tony and Frances, it's customize your life, and it's the whole message that goes along with that. And so I love helping people who have potentially a seed of an idea and go, I think I want to write about this thing in leadership, or I want to write about this thing in ministry, or, you can go to the section of nonfiction books in a bookstore or a library, and there's hundreds of thousands of titles. And so I love helping people refine that message, because it kind of echoes on that thought, on that idea of our thoughts. Sometimes there's so much bouncing around in your head, especially if you're kind of a personal growth junkie and a leadership junkie. It's like, oh, there's so many things bouncing around in my head. I could do this, and I could do this, and I could do this. And it's kind of like a dog chasing its tail, And so I love helping to kind of draw that out and pull the core message and say, this is the area you should work on. You can leave this stuff to the side, or maybe this is another book. Or maybe your idea is not quite there yet. You need to add something to it to turn it into a book. So I that's kind of my sweet spot, is helping people pull that out And also it's a mindset thing. Like you said, a lot of people think, oh, I'd love to write, but I could never do that.
Mhm.
And, I want to be careful here because there's everybody can communicate. We communicate every single day. So you can certainly refine your skill of writing and become better at it. And that's my buddy that's got a bite right on. Let me back up. My buddy that's writing a book about that is teaching you how to do that. These are the things that you're going to struggle with. These are the things that you're going to have to work through. And so there's definitely things you can improve. But what I try to teach people is that if you have a good framework, if you have a good starting point, writing is really the chipping away and, keeping yourself in the chair and just doing it every single day. And you're going to work on it and revise it and edit it and do that kind of thing. Ultimately, you're going to get where you want to go. So it's a mindset thing of confidence and going, yeah, we can do this. We can work on this together and bring your book to life, essentially.
So I guess you don't have those resources ready to tap into right now, right? But you're working on those?
I am. I'm working on them, and we can share where my website is. It'll kind of point you to all the different things I've got going on that'll be coming online soon.
Okay. Why don't you just, I don't think, Ness, do we have a mechanism to put that up there?
I can comment it from my phone in the chat so people can see it and we can put it up there. So if you can just give it to me, just let me pull up the Facebook 1 second.
Yeah, I can. My website is just barnettwrites.com. So
Barnett
my
Writes.
last name, RITES.com. That's kind of my go-to where everything is. You can branch off to a couple different projects that I'm working on from there. But that'll get you, that's the best place to start. And then we kind of, as I flesh it out, I'll keep adding things to that. That's what I'm building out as my go-to spot.
BarnettWrites.com. Okay. Let's see.
There it is. Okay, cool.
Boom.
So if anybody's, is that on? Yeah, that's on the regular, on the public chat screen, correct? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good.
We
Thanks.
can post that up there after we get through questions if you want.
Okay, so the first question, there's some people asking for this stuff over there too. So what books rather than your own do you recommend for people to read if they're looking to grow in their journeys as a person?
Ooh, okay. That's a good one. So it kind of, I guess it depends on where you want to grow, but how about this? I'll tell you some of my favorites that I've enjoyed reading. I've really enjoyed, there's a book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. Actually, I have it right here. So that's what the cover looks like. And the most powerful lesson I got out of that book was from one drawing. And this goes with me with my thoughts and bouncing around in my thoughts. This is the one drawing. There we go. That jumped out at me. And he's got, the circle is just your energy. And if you're trying to go in 1,000 different directions, you make little to no progress. But if you decide this is the important thing that I need to work on, and you lean into it and you take off in that direction and while excluding other things, that's gonna make you the most headway. So I really like that book. It's easy to read. It's something that's kind of, I think Cynthia just said she just finished reading that book. So it's really good. He's actually got another book out called Effortless that's it's in my stack, Bill, but I have not read it yet. That kind of piggybacks on that. So I really enjoy that book. The other one that's powerful is James Clear has a book called Atomic Habits. And if you don't know who James Clear is, James Clear has written a blog for years and years and years and built up his audience to the point where I think that book's been a bestseller for over a year. And I mean, it's done phenomenally. But again, it kind of ties in with that process thinking where he says, if you can master these little habits, he teaches you how to introduce a new habit that piggybacks on an additional habit. So you kind of stack those things to make that progress and that headway. And it's another one. He's got a really good writing style that is easy to follow, and it doesn't leave you feeling overwhelmed, but it feels like, okay, I can make a difference and kind of move forward in there. Trying to think if there's anything else. I should have prepped for that question. Should have known that was coming. So, but yeah, those are two really good ones to start with.
Okay, what was that? Is that the last one that Vanessa, you put up there?
Yeah, and then essentialism was also put in the chat by EIS Solutions. Coming to the rescue.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like Cynthia was an avid reader of essentialism. Got it up on the old vision board. All these people in the business have vision boards and dream boards for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and I think that what I loved about that drawing, and Cynthia, you probably understand this, is like, I think when you have these aspirations that I think a lot of the people that are in this world that we live in, when you have this aspirations, you can get in your own way when you're so excited about everything and everything's shiny and I should chase this and do this wonderful thing. And then you end up making little to no progress in any direction. And I've stumbled there too. I'm an idea person, but sometimes the execution, I get in, whether it's fear, whether it's like, is anybody going to want this, or imposter syndrome or whatever, I can get in my own way and go, let's exclude everything to, for now, and push in this one direction and see what happens. And you might do that for 90 days and go, well, that wasn't the right direction. Okay, that's fine. You gave it a shot. Now I'm going to pivot and go to the next thing and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've done a lot of work of really kind of honing in and keeping the main thing kind of an idea,
Yeah.
Because there's a zillion different directions we can go.
Yeah.
And that was the challenge that I really felt like I was facing in writing my book. And I reached out for some help because, I just, when I share places and stuff, I think my biggest challenge is honing down in, an hour or two's worth of whatever I have to share,
mm-hmm.
and focusing in just, enough information to get in there. Cause I have a tendency to, there's so much. I mean, I'm 68 years old, been around a while, and you just keep gathering information and having experiences, and you just want to share everything with everybody, but you can't.
Yeah.
So I really love this idea of kind of honing in and just keeping the main thing, and keeping your energies focused in the proper direction so that you can accomplish what you really want to accomplish. If I didn't have help in writing my book, it never would have gotten done. And it accomplished what I wanted to do, is get it in a smaller format of only 120 some odd pages.
Yeah.
So that it wasn't some giant fat book where people didn't want to read it.
Yeah. I will say this, since you brought that up, one of the things that I love about what I get to do is I think it's important, especially to the people watching this and listening who might want to write a book. It's important to kind of almost redefine what a book is, because I think we think of a book as, oh, it's got to be 300 pages and it's got to be hardbound and it's got to have a dust jacket and it's got to be some big publisher published it, and maybe I'll get lucky and get on the New York Times bestseller. The truth is, books come in all shapes and sizes. There's a guy I've found that teaches about habits, and he writes short ebooks. That's all he does. And I've written a couple of short books like that, where it's like, my goal was, if you got on a 2-hour flight, you could download an ebook, read it during the flight, and change something about your life. You could have an outcome at the end of it. And I want people to know that a book you don't have to bloat it and make it huge to be a book. That's more about, oh, does this look the way I think it should look, versus does this cause a transformation in the reader? So if anybody on here is thinking about writing and wanting to come up with that message, I've seen a lot of books that probably could have stopped after chapter 4. To be honest with you, it's like, that's the book, but then we added 6 more chapters to make it a book. And so I would just kind of, I guess it's encouragement and a warning, if those two things go together. Encourage you to refine that message to where it helps people. That's really what we want in anything, in a transformation on this live show, on a podcast, is we want to help people at the end of it and give people an action that they can do something about. So, whether that's 5,000 words or 40,000 words or 65,000 words or whatever the page is, if you keep that in mind as you're sharing your message, I always write reader first. I always spin around and go, what's the reader experiencing when they read this chapter? What do they, when they get to the end of this, what do I want them to do? And then does what I've written deliver that? Does it cause that transformation to take place? And if it's not, I go back and rework it, because it's always got to be about the reader and what the reader's experience is in order to serve them well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So good.
Sorry, I got a little passionate there.
Yeah, that's great, man. It's funny that, for those who are church folk in our audience, yeah, we used to have a little joke, is like when a preacher or somebody or anybody was up there delivering a message, if they went beyond and you started to feel like the message dropped off, we say, well, the anointing left about 10 minutes ago and he's still going. It's like the power of the message is just kind of dropped off, and he's just talking now, And I think it's the same thing with the book, is like we can just put tons more stuff in there, but does it really belong there? And is it really going to help people, on the other receiving end of that, So that's such a great advice to give.
Yeah. And it's funny. I just saw a comment from Jason about the best. Yeah, there you go. The best thing you can do is stop when you reach the end. Right. And I think intuitively we know when the end is. Like, if you've ever spoken, this is one of the differences between writing and speaking on a stage. If you're speaking on a stage, you can tell when people are glazing. They start looking down and they lose eye contact. And it's like, okay, as a speaker, if you're any good, you can know, all right, I'm losing them, time to stop. In a book, you don't have that. I don't know what you're experiencing. So I have to think about that as I'm writing and go, is this enough? Do I need to stop? And when you reach that point, that's fantastic. That stop, because chances are there's going to be other ideas. Like I said, I've got a notebook full of book ideas. So I'm not going to fit everything about my worldview and what I want to do in one book. So finish it, go on, do another one.
Well, some of the people that are putting comments up here, Jesse, are people that I've worked with, and I'm just here to tell you all. Like Zoraida just got the latest comment up there. She's got enough in there to write 10 books with her experiences that would help just zillions of people. So. But everybody really does too. Sandy's one of our counselors that you saw a couple of comments from. Tram and Phil, they've been on the show actually. They're awesome. They have their own business out here in California called Transformations with a Z. And that was all born out of their own experience of going through the process, So this element of going through this process yourself really repositions you, It's like so many people feel disqualified, for anything. We had one event, it was right before COVID hit actually. And it was it was at the main event, the last live main event that we did with Tony and Frances's organization. And I asked everybody who ever felt disqualified when they come to these meetings to stand up. And about half of them stood up, and I said, now the rest of you, it's time to get honest. Out of the rest of you, who feels disqualified, and be honest about it. And 99% of everybody else who remained stood up, because we all do. Yeah. We get intimidated by things, and we think, like, I think you mentioned earlier, is like, oh, I couldn't write a book, or I couldn't do this. Yep. As we go through a process, any process in life that brings transformation, and even reflecting back on my own experiences as a drunk, like I said, I was working on my testimony. My testimony as a drunk, I worked in New York City with the homeless for 28 years, and my testimony went out almost every day to somebody on the streets who is struggling with drugs and alcohol and helping to get into rehabs and stuff, so everything can be turned around for the good and utilized. And books are such a great, powerful way to be able to reach who knows how many people, especially in this day and age, with the help of Amazon and other, mainly Amazon, I think. I don't even know whether anybody goes to Barnes and Noble anymore or anything like that, but Amazon is just so easy to access. In so many different formats. I right along with you, I encourage everybody who's got it at all in their hearts to go ahead and investigate that. And then if you check out Jesse's website, which is scrolling along the bottom there, and kind of keep up on his progress of putting these other sites together, I guess you're going to be working on to help people that they can tap into, correct?
Yeah, and I know we're up against the top of the hour, but I was just going to say, one of the things that I'm working on now and I'm super excited about is I'm calling it a 7-day book framework. And my idea is this is going to be a course that'll have some video components. It'll have some some PDFs, some things that you can interact with. But my idea is Stephen King, the horror writer, I guess that's how you'd classify it, has a great nonfiction book about writing. And he says you should be able to write your first draft of a book in a season, in 90 days. So I'm not saying it's perfect and you're going to publish it, but get the ideas out of your head and on paper. So my thought was, starting from that point, if in 7 days I can teach you how to take that seed of an idea and determine a book framework out of it. And my thought was with pastors. Pastors have messages that really resonated, some ideas that they saw helped people, and people come to them all the time for, how do I solve this problem, whatever it is in my world. So this thing is going to be the first thing that I create that's going to help you to determine whether your idea has actually got legs. And I will be honest with you, will it be something you can turn into a book, and then turn that into a kind of a working framework where you have some confidence and go, okay, this part is going to be my book. So it helps you limit to the other things and go, okay, I'm passionate about this other thing, but that's not for this book. Mm-hmm. So it helps you cut out 80% of the stuff that's noise to focus on that 20% that's really going to make a difference.
Well, if I had talked to you early on, Jess, I probably would have had my book out a couple of years earlier.
Hey, well, that's all right. We can work on another one in the future. But I will say this, if that's something that anybody is interested in, you can just shoot me an email. It's just jesse@barnettwrites.com. That's something that I would love to just get your feedback. If it's something that it helps you, that might be something that's beneficial to you as I build it out, because that's how I think it's something that will help a lot of people decide, yeah, this is something I need to do, or maybe it's back to the drawing board, and maybe then you start to pull pieces and parts together to refine that idea. So that's the thing I'm working on that I'm super excited about right now.
Great advice. And if anybody is out there that's definitely looking into that and, thought about writing a book, check into Jesse's information, and then turn on your friends to go check out this live later on YouTube, on my YouTube. What is it, Ness? EIS? I don't even remember anymore.
Emotional Intelligence Solutions, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, something like that. If you'll find it. And then on the YouTube channel, and you'll be able to, check out this, the recording of this. Once again, we got Soul Crushers here available on Amazon. Correct, Jess? Any place else they can go? Yeah,
there's actually, you can just go to barnettwrites.com, and there's a link that says Soul Crushers book. It is other places, but Amazon's, I'll be honest, the easiest place to find it. So, okay. And it's Prime, so should be in there in 2 days.
Very good.
And it's EI Solutions, the YouTube, just to correct.
Oh, thanks.
Welcome.
And then a shameless plug for my book too. We always put that out there. That's also available on Kindle, on what's the other one besides paperback? What do they call that one? Audible. That one there. Available on Audible.
Like a bundle package on Amazon.
There you go.
Yeah, we got to collaborate, Jess, for sure.
I'm in. Let's do it.
And I have a Spanish version on my bill-hoffman.com. You can go to the store on my blog post on WordPress, and you can pick that up in Spanish and downloadable PDF right away. So, Jesse, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me. I enjoyed talking to you.
It's been great, and hopefully a lot of people are just going to tap into this stuff after this. Ness, thank you so much, as always, for being an awesome co-host and a awesome media czar.
Yes.
And next week,
thank you, Jesse.
Oh, absolutely. Wouldn't do it without you. And next week we have Sandy Myers, one of our EIS counselors, is going to be on. So we're looking forward to that. And right before we go, I just want to see the last few comments here. Okay, so we got some real, I guess your buddy Jason knows a bit about you.
He knows a little bit.
He's the biggest hype man. I love his.
I know, isn't that great?
Blowing you up. It's awesome.
That wasn't planned, by the way. That was just him. He's a good guy.
Did you hire him?
Yeah, Jason will connect later.
So we got Cynthia, of course, thanking us. Then we have Angelica, and there's Sandy. Sandy's on next week.
Yay.
So, yep, this was great. See you all soon.
Yeah,
Thanks so much,
everybody.
Jesse. Thanks, Vanessa.
of
Right
course.
now, EIS out.
I
I love saying that. Bye.
know.